As I mentioned to you earlier, I have a number of letters that ask consent to be placed in the record, as well as the emails that were declassified, I think some at 3 o'clock this morning, that they be placed in the record.
Without objection, so ordered.
Thank you. And I know there was claim this morning the committee was following my precedent, Judge Kavanaugh. Not so. For Justice Kagan, we had 99% of her documents for her time at the White House. And, of course, we do not have, we have less than 10% of yours. And there were 860 documents designated as committee confidential by the nonpartisan National Archives. That was discussed with both the Democrats and Republicans on the committee. Nobody objected to that. But let's go to follow up on our questions yesterday. We discussed the fact that while you worked on nominations in the Bush White House, you received stolen material from a Republican Senate staffer named Manny Miranda. I thought it was a digital Watergate. He stole 4,670 computer files from 6 Democratic senators. He was doing this in an effort to confirm some of President George W. Bush's most controversial judicial nominees. They were some of the most contentious fights of the day, and this Republican stole 4,670 computer files. Now, in 2004 and 2006, you testified. A number of senators, both Republicans and Democrats, asked you, and you said you never received any stolen materials. That doesn't appear to be accurate. You also testified that you knew nothing about this scandal until it was public, and if you had suspected anything untoward, you would have reported it. You also testified to Senator Hatch that you never received any document that even appeared to you to have been drafted or prepared by Democratic staff. I also asked you yesterday whether Mr. Miranda asked to meet privately off-site to hand you documents related to Senators Biden and Feinstein. I also asked about him sending you, quote, intel with extraordinary detailed specifics about what I was going to ask a highly controversial nominee just days later, something I never said publicly. I also asked about you receiving a draft, a non-public letter of mine, before any mention was made public. You testified you didn't recall anything specific, but you thought that the sharing information between staffs was common. So let me ask you this. Has anyone told you what any Democratic senators have been advised to do by our staff at this hearing?
I think there's been a lot of...
Tell the truth! Tell the truth!
There's been a lot of discussion about what individual senators might be interested in, and when I met
I really want to hear what you have to say, Judge, what protesters have to say. Please go ahead. Have you been advised, have you been told what any Democratic senators have been advised to do by our staff at this hearing?
Right. So when I met individually with the 65 senators, including almost every member of the committee, a lot of the senators, a lot of you in the meetings told me issues you were interested in. I think your staff was probably talking to...
No, but has anybody said to you, for example, Senator Leahy's staff is asking him to do this at the hearing tomorrow?
Well, I think you yourself told me what you were going to ask. So I
try to give you a good heads up, and I appreciate the meeting. But has anybody else told you this is what Leahy's staff is asking him to ask at the hearing tomorrow?
Again, I think this might be a different kind of process because you all were very transparent when I met with you. I'm looking around and saying, here's what I'm focused on, and here's what I'm going to ask you at the hearings, and it's turned out to you were accurately telling me that your concerns were.
And you're saying that's normal, but did anybody hand you anything marked highly confidential
For this.
about any one of these senators?
Now, I'm not remembering anything like that, but you all did talk about the issues. In other words, there are no surprises. They're not no surprises, but there are, you gave me a basic concerns and issues you want to
I want to make
raise.
sure we're clear on this.
Yeah.
Nobody handed you something marked highly confidential, but that is the material you received from Manny Miranda. For example, on July 18, 2002, days before an extremely controversial hearing for Fifth Circuit nominee Priscilla Owen, Mr. Miranda sent you an email with the subject line, highly confidential. Informed you that Senator Biden's staff was asking him not to attend the meeting that day. On March 18th, 2003, Mr. Miranda sent you several pages of talking points that were stolen verbatim from Democratic files. The talking points revealed what arguments Democrats were making on another controversial nominee, Miguel Estrada. The subject line of the email stated it was not for distribution, meaning Mr. Miranda was asking you not to share the information. This has now been, as of 3 o'clock this morning, made public. So yesterday when I asked you about these specific events, you said you didn't have any recollection. So I'm not going to ask if you remember receiving this email. I'm going to ask you this. Why would you ever be asked to keep secret Democratic talking points if they were legitimately obtained?
I am looking at these, Senator, and it says, for example, it looks like that Biden staff is asking him not to attend the hearing. I don't know why that.
But look how you received it.
I know, I don't know why that's even confidential, because it.
Whether it is or not, would you consider that somewhat unusual to be receiving from a Republican staff member something marked highly confidential, telling him what he's found out the Democrats going to do?
Well, as I explained yesterday, Senator, my understanding of this process is that the staffs do talk with one another, that they're not camps with no communication. And that was my experience when I worked in the White House. And so it looks like Biden's staff is asking him not to attend the hearing would have been pretty standard kind of information that would be.
Not really. You read this, I would be amazed if somebody handed me a memo saying this is a confidential memo that Senator Grassley's staff has prepared for him. I not only would not read it, I'd be on immediately to Senator Grassley say, I'm bringing something over that just arrived to me. You better take a look at it. But you received, on July 28, 2002, an email from Manny Miranda that said, my staff distributed a confidential letter to Democratic counsels, not to Republicans. Mr. Miranda said, I received that letter in the strictest confidence. You were asked explicitly by Mr. Miranda to take no action on the email without his further instructions. He never asked him how he obtained the letter sent in strict confidence to me. And then July 30th, 2002, you received an email from Miranda saying they had on 100% info that I was convening a meeting about a controversial nominee. And then further in August 13, 2002, emailing obviously taken from my internal emails what I was going to do. Did any of this raise a red flag in your mind?
It did not, Senator, because it all seemed consistent with the usual kinds of discussions that happen. And sometimes people do say things of, here's what my boss is thinking, but don't share it around. I mean, I must have had, so many conversations in the course of my life like that, where someone's saying like that about something. In other words, trying to give you a heads up on something. And That just seems standard Senate staff. So nothing, the direct answer to your question is, for example, Biden, looks like Biden's staff's not asking him not to attend the hearing. That wouldn't have raised anything at all for me other than
Not even where it came from. On June 5th, 2003, you received an email from a Republican Senate staffer with the subject line, spying. That is not overly subtle. This staffer appears in over 1,000 documents we received together with both you and Mr. Miranda. She says she has a mole for us, and so forth. None of this raised a red flag with you?
It did not, Senator. Again, people have friends across the aisle who they talk to. At least this was my experience back then. Maybe it's changed. And there was a lot of bipartisanship on the committee. There was a lot of bipartisanship among the staffs. There were a lot of friendships and relationships where people would talk to, oh, I've got a friend on Senator Ted Kennedy's staff, or I have a friend on Senator Hatch's staff, or I have a friend on Senator Specter's staff. That kind of the conversation and information sharing was common. So it did not raise the flags.
Judge, I was born at night, but not last night. And if I had something that somebody said, we've stolen this, or this is how, don't tell anybody we have this, I think it'd raise some red flags. Now, we only have a fraction of your record, and I do thank the chairman for opening us up at 3 this morning. But as you know, the president has asserted executive privilege. The first time we've had to face this up here on a nominee from either Republicans or Democrats, of 102,000 pages of material, 102,000 from just your time in the White House. That includes a lot on judicial nominations. Can you confirm for me today that in that 102,000 pages, there are no emails from Mr. Miranda marked highly confidential or do not share or take no action on this, describing what he has found out the Democrats are thinking?
Senator, I am not involved in the documents process, so I don't know what's in them.
Well, that is convenient. But we don't know what's in them either, because we've never had so much withheld before. We don't know what's in all the documents. They're still being gone through by the archives because this is being rushed through and we don't get a chance to see them. That's not fair to us, and frankly, Judge, it's not fair to you. You've probably been told you have the votes to be confirmed, so you don't have to care. But I care. I care about the integrity of the Supreme Court. I care about who's on there. I think you should care what's in that, just as we should care what's in it. There are even more documents than I had time to discuss today. I find it impossible to reconcile what you're regularly being told, that your testimony that you received nothing stolen, had no reason to suspect anything was stolen, when, frankly, as we now know, Republican staffer Manny Miranda stole things. And some of the things he stole went directly to you. Let me ask you another one. You testified in 2004 that aside from participating in a moot court argument, you did not work in the nomination of Judge William Pryor. Now, he was a controversial nominee. He called Roe versus Wade the worst abomination in the history of constitutional law. He argued that constitutional right to same-sex intimacy would logically extend to activities like necrophilia, bestiality, pedophilia. You said you didn't work on his nomination personally, but you did participate in the Pryor working group, did you not?
We all were met just so you know the process, there was something called the White House, I think, Judicial Selection Committee, and Judge Gonzalez, the counsel to the president, chaired that committee. And that started immediately after President Bush came into office in 2001. And so we would meet with memos, and individual members of the staff would be assigned to different meetings.
Did you interview William Pryor?
I don't believe so. It's possible, but I don't believe so. But if I did, it would have been part of the general process where people came in.
I put in the record or Exhibit C, which said you did interview him.
It's possible. We interviewed hundreds of nominees, as I said, Senator, and we met every week for several years to go over nominees. And we worked closely with the home state senators. I had various states for district court. I had Illinois. I had California I worked on with Senator Feinstein, Senator Boxer's staff. Maryland, Senator Sarbanes and Senator Mikulski. But then we would sit in sometimes on interviews of other people who came in, and then we would meet and go over the memos. Then we would meet with the president. We met every week with the president before September 11th. After September 11th, those meetings became less frequent.
You had recommended him internally for the 11th Circuit seat, had you not?
Well, I have no reason that I wouldn't have recommended him, because he was a highly qualified Attorney General of Alabama, and Senator Sessions, of course, knew him well, and he was well respected.
The only reason I asked was that one of the emails that we have up here says, Brett, at your request, I asked Matt to speak with Pryor about his interests. I'm not asking these questions to get you in a bind, Judge. I'm asking them because it is so easy on these hearings to say, I don't remember, and oftentimes that's the case. But you mentioned Mr. Gonzalez. He had difficulty remembering when he came here. He had one hearing where, so that he wouldn't have that problem, I gave him, I think, 35, 45 of the questions ahead of time. On every one of them, he said, I don't remember, I don't recall. And then every question asked, almost every question asked by both Republicans and Democrats said, I don't recall, I don't remember. Shortly after that, he went to private practice. But the I think it is so difficult when that you don't remember the things done by somebody who I think on both sides of the aisle we would agree is one of the most egregious breaches of committee confidentiality, when Manny Miranda stole material from here, stole it to send it to you and others at the White House. And you have no recollection of that.
I obviously recall the emails, or have seen the emails, but your larger question was, did that raise a red flag? And I've answered that no.
Well, when you were in the White House, was part of your job to coach President Bush's judicial nominees how to answer Democrats' questions about Roe versus Wade?
Part of our job would have been to prepare nominees more generally, and it was common for senators to ask that question then as it is now. And so I assume that we would have been involved in going through mock sessions. I know we were involved in going through mock sessions, which is very standard for Democratic.
Well, you've been going through some mock sessions with at least one Republican senator from this committee and other Republican senators, and I'm not saying that as I got you thinking you have every right to do that. You did advise Priscilla Owen exactly how she should respond to that according to one of the emails. And my last question, do you agree that a plastic firearm created with a 3D printer, something we would not have been in the minds of our founding fathers at the 18th century, would you agree that that could be regulated or banned without creating any Second Amendment questions?
I think there might be litigation coming on that, Senator, so consistent with judicial independence principles, I shouldn't comment on a potential case like that, so thank you.
I actually written out your answer ahead of time, and I just wrote it so that you did not see what I wrote. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.